A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90, broadcasting from the Central Building, which is the home of this radio station, live on our website, www.radio1fm90.com. You click on the icon with the word Listen Live. You can also find this radio station under the different radio listening apps. Those you can obtain from the apps of your smartphone. You download, look for Radio 1 FM 90, and as long as you have an internet connection, you'll be able to listen to us from anywhere across this globe. We do encourage you to be part of this show by sharing with us your thoughts. Could be a question or comment via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Send us a message, a typed message, not an audio clip, because if you do so, if you send an audio clip, we will not be able to play it on air. Today we'll be understanding the new building control law. Now, the government of Uganda has rolled out reforms in the building sector following the amendment and assent to the commencement of the Building Control Amendment Act 2026. This law tightens regulations and improves compliance and safety standards across the sector. The amendments, which took effect on the 19th of March, just last month, come at a time when the country continues to grapple with many challenges, including illegal developments, non-compliance with building standards, and recurring incidents of building collapse that have led to loss of life and property. Today we want to get deeper into some of the key issues in this particular law so that you can understand what you need to comply to in order to avoid being caught up with it, because they are also introducing a number of fines, including express penalties. So if you're not very careful, if they find you at the site when you're not compliant, you are likely to be punished. I have two guests in studio today to share their thoughts on this matter. Let me introduce Ms. Joan Atukei. She's the Senior Legal Officer at the National Building Review Board. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you on Spectrum.
A very good evening to you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Also in studio, Dr. Stewart Mutabazi. He's a transportation and urban planning expert, Executive Director, Uganda Road Sector Support Initiative. His work involves looking at issues of building, and also when he talk about urban planning, he also has some deep knowledge about issues to do with standards and the building environment. Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Stewart Mutabazi.
Thank you, Kenneth. I'm very glad to be back in Radio 1. Thank you.
All right. I want to begin with Joan. And Joan, very quickly, you at the National Building Review Board, you seem to be jubilant. You seem to be celebrating and happy that there's a new law that is going to help you to implement a number of things. There are some people, stakeholders in the construction sector, who are concerned. There are those who have even described the law as problematic and a number of issues. But let's hear from you. Why are you so excited about the advent of this particular law?
Okay, thank you, Kenneth. First of all, Uganda has had the Building Control Act for a number of years, since 2013. The same act commenced around 2018 and has been in force since. But in that act, much as it required developers and other stakeholders to do certain things, the power to enforce those requirements was not very clear. It wasn't expressed. There were a few gray areas in that law. And this is why the amendment was key. So in the advent of this amendment now, it enables the board to effectively enforce building control, and it also brings about other administrative changes amongst the building committees. These are the implementers of the law, and it enables them to also do their work in a leaner committee and also give them powers to act in line with the law. So this is why NBRB is happy about this amendment, because it is now going to enable us to be able to enforce and also educate, enhance capacity of building committees, who are the key implementers, to be able to do their job even better.
All right. Let's look at some of the key issues that make you excited. Why you think this time around you're going to deal with some of the key problems we've been seeing in the building or construction sector.
Okay, thank you. Let me call it CAP 136. This is the current Building Control Act. the one that has been in existence from 2013, prior to the amendment, did not have powers of the board, simply had functions. So when you're executing these functions, what are the resultant powers that that accrue to these functions? That was something that was unanswered. So now the powers are given to the board clearly, in which it can act, and the parameters in which it can act are very clear now under the Act. It, for example, gives the board powers to entertain building-related complaints regarding any building or building operation. So previously, we could only entertain complaints regarding a building permit approval process. So if you're saying, for example, maybe this building committee is biased about my application, or maybe something related to the building permit approval process, that is where we could come in. But now we have the power to entertain a complaint. Kenneth, if your neighbor, for example, didn't construct their building very well and stormwater is running through your compound based on that construction, we can have the power to come on site, look at it, and then intervene accordingly. So that is one of the things that the Act has raised. The other thing that it has given us is power to enter onto any site where there are building operations. In order to meet the mandate of monitoring building developments, we can't monitor them at our desks in office. No, we have to walk onto the site, be able to analyze the situation, and then come up with a solution. So in doing that, we can, where you've ordered the building committee to take certain action and they don't, we can now enter, maybe issue a stop order, or even an evacuation order if the building is deemed to be unsafe. Maybe the building is settling. We've had situations where buildings collapse on their own. The building is just, the cracks appear, and out of the blue, the building has settled. So if for the safety of the people inside that building, if it is deemed through scientific reports, it's not just by eye view, it is not by my opinion without any science-backed, basis, then we shall have that power to also order evacuation. We also have power to recommend, to refer professionals who have been found to be engaging in any unethical practices to their respective professional bodies for disciplinary action. This is among many of the other powers that have been given to the board in line with the Building Control Amendment Act.
All right. I wanted to go a little bit deeper so that people can understand clearly before we bring in Ms. Dr. Mutabazi. Having laid out the powers and the responsibilities that have been expanded for the National Building Review Board, what are the responsibilities of the developers, we members of the public? What do we need to know? What has changed? Looking at the amendment which was sanctioned by Parliament.
Thank you. The key thing I would take away from this Act, from the amendment, number one, is that, first of all, under the Act as it currently is, the Cap 136 of the Building Control Act, every building operation ought to commence with a building permit granted by the building committee. So all building operations are supposed to be having the relevant permit granted for before they commence even. Now, what this Act has done is say, okay, in the Act it says that that building permit ought to lapse after a period of 60 months. So you should have finished your building operations realistically within a period of 5 years. But now we know that the Ugandan situation, there might be no money here and there are unforeseen circumstances. What the Act has done is provide for extension of that building permit. So what the Act even says is that the building committee should not unreasonably withhold that permission from you. So if that permit expires within 5 years, now the amendment says you can apply for an extension and they should not withhold it unreasonably. You can then continue with your building operations. Also, another thing that developers should know is that, as the law has always provided, you're supposed to not only have a building permit at the beginning of the construction or building operation, but when we complete this building, there's supposed to be a check done by the building committee to confirm that whatever permission was given to you in the beginning, you stayed true to that course and implemented it on ground. And then they also confirm that what you have constructed is safe for your occupation. This is where now the occupation permit comes in. So I've had several Ugandans ask, what happens now for me? You want me to have a permit I already constructed? What can I do to bring myself into the law? The law as it currently is says that if you don't have a permit, they are giving you a solution. You then go to the building committee and apply for an occupation permit.
For a building that is already in existence?
Yes, a building that was completed but doesn't have the requisite permission in line with the Act. You're now going to go and apply to the building committee. You're going to get an engineer, a professional, who's going to make for you as-built drawings of the building as is. You're going to then apply to the building committee amongst other requirements under the regulations, and then they are going to scrutinize these drawings and the application and eventually grant that occupation permit. But I would also like to note that this committee has the discretion. Based on what they see, it's possible that maybe over 10 years this building has worn down. There are some things that may need to change. Then they'll guide you accordingly to implement the major structural issues, if any. But that is the mode of transition that the Building Control Act Cap 136 has provided. This is not even in the amendment, but it is in the law as is.
This is the first law that is going to work backwards.
I wouldn't say it is working backwards because now this is...
let me use the real word.
Retrospectively.
That's what they say in law. Eh?
No, I wouldn't say that. Why? Because, first of all, like I said, a building permit lapses in 5 years. So now that we know that this act came in 2013, let us imagine that from 2013, someone got a permit and they are still constructing. 5 years have lapsed. So that permit, even in the 2013 dispensation, has still lapsed. You can still extend it and continue with your operations.
How about buildings that existed before 2013?
Now, buildings that existed before 2013, what the Act says, if that building had permission, we realize that, for example, under the public health building rules, which existed before the Building Control Act, it also provided for an occupation permit. Did you know? Under Rule 20 of the repealed public health rules. So if you had an occupation permit then you don't need to transition into the new act.
All right, let's continue.
But, for example, you started your construction, you got approved plans, let's say from the physical planning committee by then, and time lapsed, the 5 years have lapsed. You have not completed your construction. Or you did complete your construction, but then stopped there. A new law came in place. This new law is telling us now you have to have your occupation permit, same as the old law, which was there before we even started this construction. The requirement of occupation permit has not gone away. It was there before, it is there now. So the way to transition into this Building Control Act would be to simply go to the building committee with certain other requirements under the regulations, including as-built drawings, like I stated, and then they will guide you on a way forward. They could either approve, maybe reject in some cases, or maybe defer for certain reasons as they may deem fit. But it's also important to note now, because of that, the amendment says if you're dissatisfied with the decision of the committee, you should, first of all, it has created a new level of complaints resolution. First of all, go to the town clerk or the chief administrative officer, lodge your complaint there. Should they fail to help you, or should you be dissatisfied with their decision, you can appeal to the board. But like I also noted, we are complaints resolution board now. So if you reported to the town clerk or CAO and nothing happened, complain to NBRB, we can still intervene
All right. Let's bring in now Dr. Mutabazi to hear his perspective so far on what you've said. When I come back to you, we want to hear about what happens when somebody actually fails to comply with some of those requirements. We understand there are fines, and those fines have actually been sort of heightened. It's a major talking point. But let's go to Dr. Mutabazi. Dr. Mutabazi, you've heard from Joan explaining some of the new changes that have occurred. From your perspective, what would be your take on this?
Thank you, Kenneth. This is a very big topic, and I think you needed to invite us like on a Friday for 2 hours, because there are so many things that need to be cleared, and I hope you'll give me some time. Number one, I want to thank Joan and the building board because they have managed to put this issue at the forefront. I think the building, the matters of building and attendant issues have not captured the attention of the public as they have now. And that, to that extent, they have really managed to capture. And I wish we can have these discussions as often as possible, because they make the public get to know what they wouldn't have known. And that is the biggest achievement, I think, for this bill. Beyond that, I want to really pour cold water on the bill, because I don't think
on the law.
I mean, on the act. There isn't much that is going to change. And as Joan herself has said, basically, if you look at it, number one, the key thing is they are bringing in the money. They are trying to tax. It's a tax. And we've always told government in all the sectors, when you are going to draft a law, you must first of all understand what is the purpose. Why do you need a law? And that law must override what you're going to do. Now, the moment you bring the law and the first thing is money or punishment, and in a case which is not criminal, then you've already watered down the purpose of the law, because it becomes very weak. I think the best option would have been the building board to know what is the prevailing problem, and how can we address it best. And I think the key thing is the problem. We have a problem of building structures in a haphazard manner. They have the other aspect of foreign buildings that collapse. That's the other, another thing altogether. But for now, you have buildings that are done in a haphazard manner. And so we needed to go back and ask, why do people build in the way they are building? Number one is poverty. Number two is lack of information. Number three is poor structures and systems. Joan here will tell you that the building control board, the building board is still very young. It has a small structure. We were talking to Joan before he came on air. They have about 46 people. They have a budget of about less than 22 billion per year, out of which half is for salaries. The rest is just non-wage and small things like that. Now, to bring in a law which you know you are not going to actually implement is basically not very wise. So
you're looking at a problem of enforcement.
Enforcement, who's going to do it? Where is the structure to deliver the law? It's not there. And we must first go back to where it started from. This government passed the law of decentralization. Power is not in Kampala, is not supposed to be in Kampala. Local governments are supposed to be running the show. There needs to be a very strong government at the district, but not only at the district, but at the sub-county. Now, if you have government at the sub-county, most of these issues would be dealt with. I want to give you an example, a personal example, Kenneth. I was going to build somewhere in Kasangati some time back, And I had land. Someone else had already built in front of me, and they had built into the road, closer to the road. So I was directly opposite them. When I was going to build, when I was putting the perimeter, the enforcement came. Specifically, actually, they passed through the LC1 chairman. He came and said, "You can't build like this." But you know, I was putting where my stone was, and they said, "You can't." I said, "But this is my land." And then they said, "No, you cannot." So they said, "Push back." I had to push back, but leave alone that, there was my neighbor whose perimeter I was trying to be exactly in the same line. So mine, if you go there, you'll find that it is pushed back inside because I had some little bit of more land, and then it's not in line. Now, if you look at who did this, it was the LC1 chairman. What law was he using? Nobody knows.
But now they're telling you there are building committees.
Now,
building committees
now
which are in charge.
Those building committees, that's where the problem of building review board needs to address, because they are not theirs. And they are not empowered by law. They are not speaking from either the law, most of them, and they are also not speaking from technical perspective. And that's where the problem lies.
That was in
because
the past.
Even
these new amendments, now bring them on board. Give them powers.
Even today, you know, most of those boards, and I have seen them, most of those committees, they speak from a point of ignorance. Number one, there is a lot of corruption there. So they take each case by how they want to take it, not by law. Because I've given you my personal example.
Selectively. They never say. For instance, if you look at the standard for classification of roads, let's take that, which is very, very critical in building. I'm sure that you need to pay particular attention to that. What space would you need to build your house away from a certain road? That's very critical. And the roads have classifications, for instance, a highway or whichever, class B or class C. Now, without getting that information to the committee, the building committee, you are leaving that for them to gamba around, and that's exactly what they have been doing. Because you need a structure of government, civil service, civil servants, public servants, who are well aware, well versed with what is supposed to be done for them to deliver this service. Any service that is being done through a system that is not very clear will definitely bring results that are not clear. And so the building review board itself is based in Kampala. And definitely they don't have the structure on the ground to deliver what they are proposing. And until they address that, they are going to keep moving in circles. I am seeing, if I can, the public is raising up and saying, why has it come at this time when they are breaking? People's businesses are being broken down across the country. I don't know who gave this. I don't know whether Building Review Board is part of it or it is whichever part of government. Now, you need to know that this is not the first time that this is being done, breaking down buildings. This is not the first time that a government agency is coming up to talk about planning and ensuring that enforcement of building plans. It is not going to be the last, because the systems and structures that are supposed to deliver that work are not there. And what you are going to see is, unfortunately, you are going to see the review board using the police and the army to enforce. Now, they are going to beat up people and tell them you built in a wrong place. They will use bullets and fire, and then finally, after some years, it will die down. All right.
I have seen people in my area where these kiosks have been brought down. I want to give you the next 2 years, you'll find them there.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. We're going to go for a quick break. When we return, we'll hear about the penalties, but then we'll also allow Joan to respond to some of the issues that Mr. Mutabazi has put across. But keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. When we return, We'll continue this discussion, but also sample some of your concerns. Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Live on Radio 1 FM 90. Today we are looking at the new building control law. We already had a law that started in 2013, but there have been some amendments bringing in some stringent requirements. And I have two guests here in studio, including Dr. Stewart Mutabazi, who is a transportation and urban planning expert, and Ms. Joan Atukei, Senior Legal Officer at National Building Review Board, the people who are supposed to implement this particular law. Joan, I know you want to respond to some of the issues that Mr. Mutabazi raised, but it will be very important for us first to conclude the other leg of the discussion. People to understand what awaits those who do not adhere to this particular law. So we are told there are fines, punishments, including even a jail term, if you do not adhere to the law as amended. What are some of the issues that we would like to share with the members of the public?
Thank you, Kenneth. For me, I believe that before I even go into the penalties, we need to understand why they exist, why they were enhanced. I'll give you an example. If, for example, I have off my head a 20-story building, and I designed it, and maybe I didn't even get any design help from any engineers. I simply went and built it, irrespective of whatever ratios of materials I used, constructed that 20-story building, knowing that it might house about, let's say, 100 people. And that building collapsed and killed 100 people. The penalty before in the Building Control Act, Cap 136, was 1 million Uganda shillings. For somebody who has invested I don't know, maybe 1 billion Uganda shillings to construct that illegal building that has caused such adverse effects. Now, the law has been made more deterrent. It is now that whoever constructs a building without a building permit will be liable to a fine of 2 currency points per square meter of that building. The point is to make it deterrent, because we have several reports, investigations conducted by the board that show the adverse effects of not seeking permission in the correct way from the local authority.
You break down those figures so that people can understand. When you say 2 currency points, you put it in terms of money, so that people can understand.
Okay, so if this building, for example, the room we are in, is, let me roughly say, 100 square meters, the penalty for constructing this building, which is 100 square meters, is going to be 2 currency points per square meter. A currency point in the law of Uganda is equivalent to 20,000 shillings. So that is going to be 40,000 shillings times 100. And that will be 4 million shillings as a fine. So it depends on the square meterage. It depends on the type of building. But that is essentially the fine for constructing without a building permit.
Okay.
Yes.
What else?
What else is that now, for using a prohibited building method, maybe that's something else I should note. Now the law, besides previously prohibiting the use of dangerous building methods that are deemed dangerous, after studies conducted, the Honorable Minister then prohibits it and says don't use it. Now the Act is also expanding that power of the Honorable Minister of Works to permit innovations, technologies, building methods, building materials that have not been conventionally used in the built environment. These are now being welcomed. They can be studied, looked into, and I don't even need to be a professional or, an engineer to come up with something. Me, Joan, I can be in my living room, come up with something that I think will work. Even if I haven't really done the math or the science of it, I can then go to the National Building Review Board. They are going to do the study for me. They are going to conduct a thorough study of it and then permit the usage widely throughout the country. So now, currently, if you're using a method that is prohibited, that means a lot of study, rigorous study has gone into it, and they've seen that that method is unsafe. Right now, the penalty is 5 currency points per square meter of the built-up area using that prohibited method. And like I said, a currency point is equivalent to 20,000 shillings. So 5 currency points per square meter. This is again for safety of the users of this method, for safety of the persons who occupy this building using this method, where they have studied and found that it is not right for or not ready for construction. You know, it could be something that has potential, but the way it is being used, or the materials being used to execute that thing, could also be wrong. And maybe you need time to study and guide the public on how to use it effectively. So that is another example. I would also like to point out previously, one of the offenses under the Building Control Act was liability for causing accidents on building control sites, on building construction sites. Now, the penalty for causing death, injury, or destruction of property based on negligence was previously about 5.6 million Uganda shillings, which is 288 currency points. Currently, because of the implications of that negligence, you know, someone once told me, if a man, for example, dies, then you've killed a whole generation. You've killed the persons he has been supporting. You've killed the futures of the children whose fees he has been paying, the village that he has been lifting up. That penalty now has been increased to 500 currency points, or 12 years imprisonment, or both. So those are the areas where the penalties have been upped in the amendment of the Act.
All right. Very quickly, if you can respond to some of the issues that Mutabazi put across, and then we want to hear him respond to the penalties very quickly.
But I have many others.
Yes, you will be given a time to respond.
Okay. Kenneth, he raised a number of issues. I may not remember them expressly, but I would like to start
some
here.
of the key ones.
The key ones. One, we have to have faith in the local authorities. If we don't, then where is Uganda moving? Because, as he even mentioned about the decentralization policy, right now, the law creates a hierarchy. NBRB, the board, is a regulator, an appellate level body, or a second level complaints resolution body. The building committees, who are the key implementers of this law, the ones who you go to take your plans, scrutinize, give you the permits, who are supposed to enforce, who are supposed to know what is happening building-wise in their jurisdiction, are located at every district, every urban authority. This is a municipality, a city, a district. Those people are there. What has the amendment done? Previously, this committee was even headed by a politician. But right now, the politician is not heading that committee. It is now comprised only of technical staff, chaired by the engineer. It has also been made leaner. There are now only 5 members. And on top of that, the accounting officer, who was previously a member, has been also taken away. This person is now simply an appointing authority, a complaints resolution authority, and he or she can prevail over his or her staff.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Let's go to Mr. Mutabazi. You've had the fines. The fines prohibitive. You fail to follow the law, you'll be punished. And probably that's what you were talking about, implementation. So you can see the fines. They have been heightened to deter, to ensure compliance.
Yeah, like I told you, there are so many things, but key among them is building board is not telling us what exactly are they looking for in a building for it to pass and get a permit. That's not clear at all. And it has been left vague, I think, for a purpose. Because if you talk, because if you look at a big building, like Mapera House or whichever in Kampala Central, that one is easier. You can know the parameters. But I want us to cast our eyes back to where we come from. A typical brick and mortar house in Nansana, worth about 20 million. Yes? What would require the committee to pass that house?
The law also stipulates what kind of buildings are supposed to be where.
It is true. They are very clear, very classic.
Like you talked about the roads. how far should somebody build from the road?
You see, that is what is not very clear, because someone can have, you have these houses in Kamocha, downtown in Kamocha, and I don't know what classification they put them under that. So now, Kenneth, I have so many issues, but that defines what the purpose is. If you have about 2.5 million houses that are lacking in Uganda, we lack 2.5 million houses. Most people live in ramshackle houses. Most people build in any way as when they have some little money. Now, if you come in with regulations that are not clear, and with a committee that can come and tell you, no, this house is not fit and we can break it, then that means the point I made earlier would be that at the end of the day, this law will come in only to collect money. As long as you pay money, the house will pass. As long as you haven't paid money, the house will not pass. I want to give you one clear direction. The Building Review Board needs to sit down together with other government agencies and do a coordination to know where they are coming from, where they would want to go. And the best place to start from is to benchmark for countries that have gone through this cycle where we seem to be crawling. There are countries that are implementing, and we need to borrow from the best so that we don't fall very far away. If you look at Uganda, for instance, we've had so many planning laws since before independence, since the colonial time. And we had the British who were in charge of this country. Unfortunately, the British are not the best architects. They are not the best planners, physical planners. So they came, and you see what they did, what they left here in Uganda is not the best. Even when you look at their cities in London, London and others, they are not. Now, those are the ones we are trying to follow. If we want the best, we need to look elsewhere. We don't need to look at Japan, for instance. Japan is a very complicated case scenario for physical plan. We need to look at countries in Nordic areas like Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, and others. Those provide a good benchmark. Now, without doing this, we are just borrowing things wholesale and trying to plant them in Uganda, and we end up, instead of curing the problem, we are only trying to pick money and to harass people, and then just like most of the laws in government, the government is always silent on what they are required to do. Right. What are they supposed to do as government? Right. Apart from trying to say we will collect money and punish you and beat you and kick you with a stick. That's not how things are supposed to be done.
All right. Let's go back to Joan. Joan, very quickly, we want to hear from the listener, but there are a number of issues that Mutabazi has raised, including you not, coming out clearly on what kind of buildings are supposed to be where and things like that. Can you clearly share some information on that, and then we hear from the listener?
Okay, thank you. Currently, the law has always classified buildings. All types of buildings are classified under the building control regulations, and because of that classification, there are also equivalent requirements that are provided under the law. So for a Class A building, there are going to be requirements. Class B, there are requirements, and a Class C building, there are also requirements. So that is not true. This is clearly stipulated, has always been since 2020.
So for instance, I cannot construct a building to sleep in on Kampala Road. It's not possible. That's
another thing I was coming to.
Okay.
We have to know that building control does not work in isolation. In fact, it starts with physical planning. I cannot put my building on Kampala Road because the land use that has been stated by the Physical Planning Committee, according to their physical development plan, does not augur with a residential house. So when we see a building coming up, NBRB and the building committee are determining strength, suitability for purpose, but location, distance from the road, this is physical planning territory.
All right. Let's go to the listener. Comments coming in. Ham Rising from Entebbe. How good law, but not for the ordinary Ugandan. It should target buildings with a budget of 50 million and above. Otherwise, this is going to be a Chitu Kidogo scheme for the enforcement team. Then we have another comment. Does the law apply to everyone, even in residential homes all over Uganda? That is Mercy, listening in from Kasangati. Tom Rising said the Museveni government is really good for those connected. It has no shortage of openings for eating for the connected. This building board is just one window of such, like traffic police department in the police and land office. Let people eat. Then we have Geoffrey listening in from Bali. Good evening, Spectrum. Everything is confusing. We have Physical Planning Act in place, and it talks about issues of building plans right away from the village level, but our problem is enforcement. I built a house in Mbale city, but no one even asked me for the plan. Are we just interested in having and shelving many documents and the laws? That's Geoffrey listening in from Mbale. Moffat listening in from Kampala. Kenneth, our systems still work like that of Amin when he will come up with a dream about something and wants to make it as a national plan, or an ignorant person seeing his university son coming home driving, and he will take his son to register in a university. We have another comment here. Good evening, Spectrum. Thanks for the show. My comments on the topic at hand. Ms. Joan asks, from the 2013 law was in place but without mandate. What then was the purpose of creating or enacting a law you can't enforce? 2, Building Act together with the current trade order could have come with good intention, but a wrong time, especially when no much sensitization is done to the public. Your negligence cannot go unnoticed. 3, where have you been all this long, together with local physical planning committees, when all buildings erected under your watch, money spent to local authorities, and you want to fault the developers at this point in time? The Building Review Board complacency is one of the biggest problems in the industry, when even people in the nights are creating risk of shoddy works under their own watch. Why do you suggest that the law with amendments is working retrospectively as opposed to going forward? In my opinion, the scheme is intended to extort money, increasing corruption, and in the next few years, the program is dead and the same buildings are rebuilt. That's Kamugo Fred Keter in Chida Municipality. Good evening, Radio 1. This law has caused commotion, hypertension, name it. Now, my question, 95% of all houses in Uganda are not built on plan. Are they going to demolish all? That is Johnson listening in from Kampala. Anderson, I have 3 questions. How does Building Control Committee relate with the physical planning committees? It seems a duplication. They are supposed to work hand in hand or even merged. Are the members of the committees paid, or are their bills made by us, the citizens, in one way or the other? What plans does the National Building Review Board have to improve slums in Uganda, bearing in mind that most slum dwellers may not meet the requirements in the Act? That's Adena Dennis listening in all the way from Kitgum district. F. Rice says, what buildings are we talking about? I see slums areas, e.g. Kasokoso areas. Are they affected too? How about building in wetlands? I wish we first started by knowing the problem and sensitizing people. Fines index water down the good intention. Again, these rules will, like many, be selectively applied as seen in NEMA cases. You could even go to industrial parks, most in wetlands, and see for yourselves. Kauma Digo, listening in from Mitiana, what could be the intention for the building control law? Is it not a disguised way of grabbing people's properties, or is it widening the corruption net? Let's first respond to those ones before we take more. Very quickly, Joan. Some are comments, others are questions that you can respond to.
Okay, let me state it widely because there are so many questions. I may not respond to each of them. One thing that the National Building Review Board is doing right now is developing regulations. This act is creating the skeleton, but the how and the when, the what is going to be enhanced in regulations. Another thing that I see, someone asked, are you going to demolish our buildings? Like I stated, demolition is not something you just go and do because there are certain reasons that will be behind that demolition, especially safety. So if safety is compromised, backed by a report, a scientific report by a professional, then the building committee will use its discretion. And again, like I said, we are going to come up with regulations to guide on the how, so that this thing is not abused. Someone asked about transition. The Act, as it is, provides for that transition. It provides that a building that is already completed can then get an occupation permit in line with the law. So there's a chance to transition, to regularize, and like I said, many of the guidelines are going to be provided in regulations. But I would also like to point out some of the aspects raised there are in relation to physical planning. Like I must reiterate what I stated. Physical planning is the mandate that is held under Ministry of Lands. National Building Review Board is in charge of the buildings, and we are mandated or held under the Ministry of Works and Transport. We do relate with the Physical Planning Committee, but for example, I cannot go and enforce matters of physical planning because there's a separate law, separate mandate for another committee to do that. Although the two relate in the sense that development permission is a prerequisite for building permission.
All right. 2 more comments and then I'll bring in Mr. Mutabazi. Good evening. Kenneth, tell me, are we talking about buildings or houses? Should we talk about my structure plan, or government is already having a master plan for the whole country? What problem is this law trying to address, and what are the benefits highlighted by the promoters of this? How are they in collaboration with the Lands Ministry? That's Henry Chiwenda there. Somebody else writes in and said, does that law apply universally, or it's only for urban settings? Because the building board should know that Uganda currently has a big housing deficit. How is this law encouraging people to build? Uganda should be serious with coming up with the laws. Very quickly respond to that, and then we'll hear from Mr. Mutabazi.
This law, the main issue, the main problem, or let me not say problem, the purpose of enacting this law, as stated in the preamble to this law, is to ensure planned, safe, decent building structures in harmony with the environment. So the purpose here is not to defeat development, but to try and ensure that the buildings that are coming up, buildings that are existing, are safe for the users. That is the primary goal. So we are not grabbing anyone's land, we are not demolishing anyone's property. No, we are simply saying that house you're sleeping in, the gym that you're going to, the dormitories that your children are sleeping in, should be safe and in line with the standard that is established in the National Building Code and other recognized standards. Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Mutabazi.
Yes, and I think Madam Joan has managed to, she has clarified but managed to confuse us more. There is no way, and I think if it's as she has stated, it means that we are still very confused. It seems like the building board, its mandate is inside the room, inside the house only. It doesn't look at where the house is situated. It doesn't look at what happens for someone to begin building. It just looks at safety, which is a very tiny, small component. Because at what moment then do you consider that this building doesn't require a permit? If and I keep really, because I speak for the people who the people on the ground, a typical person. I keep giving an example of Nansana. A typical Ugandan person who is building his small houses, and they also need to determine which materials are going to be used or anything. If they are using grass thatched or something like that, would that be a house? Now, if someone is building with basic materials, would you, and they have finished, and maybe the house has some windows, some doors, and etc. Would building board come in to say that this house is not fit, and they have not plastered maybe? A typical Ugandan house of the poor people that we know. So unless we answer that question, then that means we will always leave the discretion of the committee or one person who will come and judge and say, no, this building, I will not allow it. And it has happened many times where you have people who come in just momentarily and they say, no, this building is not worth. And they say, no, we can't give you a permit. So unless that question is answered, we will always keep moving in circles.
I'm afraid time is not on our side. We have to bring this discussion to an end. But this is a discussion that will continue, and like you requested, we might have an opportunity to have an expanded version of this discussion so that we can fully exhaust the issues. We want to thank you, dear listener, for tuning in and contributing to this discussion. But stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90 because the news in English is up next with Miss Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, the Soul Train.